By the time the third fuel truck rumbled up my driveway, the deputy had already taken his hands off his belt and said, in a tone that brokered no argument, "Ma'am, very calmly, if one more vehicle crosses this property line, I have to classify this as harassment and interference with a federal operation." Everything went still, especially her. Sandra Kellerman, president of the Meadowhurst Estates HOA, tyrant by temperament and hobby, froze midrant with her mouth open, clutching her clipboard like it was scripture. Behind her, 3 diesel tankers sat idling bumper to bumper, vibrating the gravel. Their drivers were the deeply uncomfortable expression of men who suspected they had wandered into something profoundly stupid. Next to me, sitting in a camp chair under my maple tree, was Special Agent Evan Robertson, ATF, off-duty, cargo shorts, ball cap, sweet tea. He slurped through a straw and muttered, "Told you this be entertaining." Sandra jabbed a finger at me and shrieked, "This man is operating an illegal fuel depot." Evan snorted, "Lady, you have no idea how funny that statement's about to get. My name is Caleb Morris, and I live on a 5-acre hobby farm that got absorbed into Meadowhurst Estates when the developer convinced the township it would make the subdivision look consistent. My land use rights stayed intact. Unfortunately, that also meant I gained an unwanted supervisor, Sandra Kellerman, full-time busybody, part-time despot. Me, I grow vegetables, raise chickens, and fix old tractors for fun. My idea of danger is replacing a fence post before sundown. Sandra, however, saw my farm as a personal affront. She was the sort of person who spiral-bound the HOA's covenant packet and filled it with color-coded sticky notes like a general planning a military campaign. Everything on my property offended her: the rooster crowing, the fencing around my garden, even my barn, which had stood there for 40 years before her HOA was a gleam in a developer SI. Normally, I'd roll my eyes, quote zoning law at her, and move on. But Sandra, she didn't like the word no, and she was about to escalate from obnoxious to unhinged. The first shot fired was a letter she slid under my door like she was delivering a cursed spell. Notice of unapproved commercial activity. You are operating a commercial fuel facility on HOA property. I stared at the letter, then at my illegal, farm-rated diesel tank behind the barn, inspected, permitted, and used solely for my tractor and backup generator. I emailed her copies of my permits, county approvals, and the relevant state law that explicitly allowed agricultural fuel storage. 48 hours later she replied, "Your permits are irrelevant under Meadowhurst standards. Remove all fuel storage within 7 days or the HOA will take corrective action at your expense." Corrective action meant harassment. She started taking telephoto pictures from the property line like a judgmental bird watcher. Violation packets began arriving weekly: grass height, unsightly equipment, offensive farm odors. She claimed my tractor was a commercial vehicle. She called my chicken coop an unauthorized accessory dwelling. I sent back the usual county codes, my agricultural exemption, and the reminder that HOA rules do not supersede zoning or property rights. She did not take this well. One afternoon I came home to find a fluorescent orange sign staked just off my driveway. Warning: illegal fuel storage fire hazard reported to authorities. She had also mailed reports to the fire department and county. The inspectors showed up, examined my tank, and apologized for wasting my time. As the fire marshal shook my hand and said loudly, "Looks perfect exactly by the book," I could practically hear the steam leaving Sandra's ears. Most people would have given up there. Sandra switched to intimidation theater. 2 weeks later, I woke to the low growl of diesel engines. 3 tanker trucks rolled down Meadowhurst Lane like a parade of bad decisions and turned into my drive. The lead driver leaned out and called, "We're here for a soil remediation order." "Nope," I said. "Definitely not." Sandra's heels clicked on the asphalt as she appeared with 2 sheepish board members behind her. She announced, projecting her voice for maximum drama, "Under emergency authority granted to the HOA, we've contracted these trucks to remove your illegal fuel and contaminated soil." You will be billed for all costs." The drivers looked uneasy. One whispered, "We got paperwork signed by the HOA president saying the fuel is unpermitted and hazardous." I took a slow breath. I knew exactly what she was doing, fabricating a paper trail to bankrupt me. What she didn't know, my land predates Medoris. My tank is registered with the state. And the man in the black pickup at the end of my driveway watching through mirrored sunglasses was my old college buddy, ATF Agent Evan Robertson, visiting for the weekend. When I joked, "My HOA president's about to invent eco-terrorism to get rid of my fuel tank," he'd said, "Record everything," then asked for her full name. So, when Sandra ordered the trucks forward, Evan stepped out, flashed his badge, and said in a tone that froze the world, "Move those trucks one more inch and we're going to have a very different conversation." Sandra laughed like he was bluffing. "The HOA has jurisdiction here." "No," Evan said calmly. "The state fire marshal does, the EPA does, and the ATF occasionally does. You, absolutely not." Then he pulled out his phone and made two calls, one to the county sheriff and one to the state environmental agency. And that's where things really began. Sandra's little HOA power trip had officially crossed into real state and federal jurisdiction, and she didn't even realize it yet. The sheriff's deputy arrived first, lights flashing mostly because he enjoyed the theatrics. He walked the property line, eyed the trucks, glanced at my perfectly legal fuel tank, and then turned to Sandra with the wariness of a man who had dealt with her before. "Let me get this straight," he said. "You arranged for heavy equipment to alter this man's property without a court order or his consent." Sandra pulled her cardigan tight like armor. "The HOA bylaws clearly state, the bylaws of your neighborhood club," the deputy interrupted, "do not outrank private property law, zoning codes, or state environmental regulations." While he was talking, two sedans rolled up state environmental enforcement. They'd received an urgent tip about an unauthorized hazardous materials cleanup happening without state notice. They spoke with Evan, then with me, then turned to Sandra. "Mom," one of them asked, "did you tell these contractors that this property had been declared hazardous by the state?" "I said it was a hazard," she stammered. "It obviously is. Look at it. Is there, or has there ever been, an official hazard declaration on this site?" He pressed. Sandra froze as the realization dawned that she'd stepped into false claims territory. The agent walked over to the confused truck drivers. "Gentlemen, do not enter this property. It appears you were misled about the legality of this job. Keep your paperwork. You may need it." The drivers couldn't throw their trucks into reverse fast enough. That's when Evan twisted the knife. He pointed at her fluorescent orange illegal fuel storage sign. "You posted warnings referencing official reports. You filed written claims about environmental violations that don't exist. You hired contractors to disturb a lawfully permitted tank with no authority." He paused. "That looks a lot like fraud and harassment, and, depending on what you do next, possibly interference with state and federal processes." Sandra's face turned the color of chalk. The deputy looked at me. "Mr. Morris, would you like to file a formal complaint?" I glanced at the trucks fleeing the property, at neighbors peering through blinds, at the HOA board members staring at the ground like they wished it would swallow them. "Yeah," I said. "I think I would." The investigation gathered momentum quietly at first, then snowballed with bureaucratic precision. Turns out Sandra had signed multiple work orders using phrases like mandated remediation and code-violating tank, implying official findings that did not exist. She had told the HOA's insurance carrier that my farm posed an imminent fire and explosion risk, hoping to force higher premiums or a policy change. She had even edited photos of my tank using some cheap phone app to make it look rusty and leaking, then attached them to her claims. The state environmental office did not find this amusing. The insurance company, once they realized they'd been lied to, went from cautious to furious. Fraud tends to do that. Then came the emails. One of the board members happily turned them over. In one thread, Sandra had written, If we can get the right agency nervous about his tank, he'll either be forced to remove it or sell us a corner of his land to extend the cul-de-sac. She might as well have signed a confession. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Evan slipped in at the back. To county officials, and the same deputy attended as well. The board sat at the front table looking like they were awaiting sentencing. During new business, the vice president cleared his throat. We've been informed that our president, Mrs. Kellerman, is under investigation for fraudulent misrepresentation to contractors and insurers, and for harassment of a homeowner beyond HOA authority. He listed potential civil liabilities, possible criminal charges, and an insurance review that could cost the HOA a small fortune. The room turned on her instantly. You told us his tank was illegal. You said the county ordered it removed. My husband works in permitting. He said none of what you claimed sounded real. Finally, the vice president asked, motion to remove Mrs. Kellerman as president. Hands shot up like synchronized swimmers. The vote wasn't close. Sandra sputtered, shrieked something about ungrateful suburban peasants, and stormed out, knocking over a folding chair. The deputy followed her outside for a brief conversation. The fallout came fast. State Environmental Office fine, $12,000 for filing false environmental claims and misrepresenting state authority fuel company lawsuit, $25,000 for fraud and breach of contract HOA insurance penalty, $15,000 billed to the association for investigation costs the new board immediately to recover from Sandra personally, and then the county prosecutor weighed in. They found enough evidence to file criminal charges, 1 count of fraud, 2 counts of filing false reports with government agencies, each charge carried up to 18 months in jail plus fines. At her arraignment, Sandra's face went red, then white, then purple as the judge read the charges. She gripped the rail and whispered, "This can't be happening. This was just about a stupid fuel tank." The judge peered over his glasses. "No, Mrs. Kellerman, this is about lying to contractors, defrauding an insurance company, and falsely invoking state authority for personal gain. These are serious crimes." Her attorney hurried to enter a plea. Sandra walked out looking like she had aged a decade in 10 minutes, facing legal fees, a trial date, and the very real possibility of jail time.